Quivira campus. And I called and I said, where is everybody? He said, you're at the wrong place. And so then, technology doesn't work when you need to do it in a rush. So sorry about that. So you'll have to take more notes and you'll have to listen more carefully because you're not going to have any visuals to help. So sorry about that. But my name's Alan. Adam did a good job there. Real quickly, I have a fabulous wife who is way better than me. We've been married for 22 years. I have 4 teenagers. My oldest is a new Marine, and then I have a senior, a sophomore, and an 8th grader. And they're pretty fun, but as you know, teenagers can be challenging, and it's really easy as a youth worker to tell you how to parent. It's really hard to actually parent. And so much of what we're going to talk about tonight, is this, there's a lot of good information that you can process, but I want you to understand that I know the difficulty of doing this in your home, because it's really easy to talk about theory, and sometimes it's really hard to actually practice that theory. So I can talk to your kid, I can talk to any teenager, and enjoy that conversation and talk about any subject. But I find it incredibly difficult to have those same conversations with my own children. So I know that it's difficult to be a parent. And, parenting is one of those things where your kids on some days, you're just like, yes, this is really fun and these kids are great to be around. And then there are other days when they're up for sale or just free and somebody else can have them. And that's normal, and I want you to know that. And so the struggle with being a parent is a normal struggle, and you will battle from time to time. Hopefully there are ups as well as the downs. Hopefully it's not all down. But I want you to know that if you are experiencing this in your home, congratulations, you're normal. And so what I'm going to talk about, understand that I'm coming to you as a parent and a person who spent 22 years in youth ministry. Okay, so as a youth worker, Adam is an expert in teenagers. He is not an expert in your teenager. Okay, so there's a difference. Okay? I know a lot about teenagers. I know nothing about your teenager. You know everything about your teenager. You know a lot more than Adam does. But the good news is what we're going to hopefully encourage you in is a partnership between the church and the home. Because we as youth workers may have some information that is helpful to you. That can encourage you and that can give you some nuggets of ideas and things to give you some help. But we're not an expert in your kid. And hopefully Adam doesn't pretend that he is. And if he does, tell me later and we'll smack him upside the head. So as Adam said, I spent a lot of years in youth ministry. I love students. I'm still a small group leader with my 8th grade son. And I love middle school students. So when I wake up in the morning, although currently my role is in adult world and I do a lot of staff leadership stuff in our church, I wake up just really excited about middle school kids. When I get to hang out with our students, I get excited. I go to summer camp and it's fun. So I'm wired that way. I love teenagers. High school kids, not so much. As they get older, they get a little more challenging. Middle school is kind of a sweet spot, but teenagers in general are wonderful, wonderful people. And you have a fantastic opportunity as a parent to just invest in your kids. And that's why we're here, because we want to see their faith flourish. We don't want to see them come through high school and come through middle school and then check out. We want to see lifelong faith in the lives of our kids. So I want to just try and give you a couple of little nuggets that hopefully can be of help when we talk about helping our students have their faith flourish. So the first, what I want to do is maybe just give you a little bit of a framework for this conversation. The first is, one of the things that we have been really working hard to do in my context is what we call intergenerational ministry. You may have heard that term before, it may be completely foreign to you, but the concept is the church is a family. And over the years, how we have done church has changed. So a long time ago, maybe pre-1950, as an example, just in our kind of era, a church was done very differently, and youth ministry was non-existent. And the church was a little bit more of a solid entity, and we were kind of all together. And frankly, church at that time was much smaller. We didn't have mega churches, or not very many. And we didn't have multi-site churches, and there wasn't so much going on. Post-1950, that's when we started to see youth ministry come alive, and I think there's a tremendous amount of good that youth ministry brings to the table. When we talk about influencing our kids at an age-appropriate level, there's a lot there. Adam knows how to speak to students. He knows how to translate the difficult theologies of our faith into a language that teenagers can begin to wrestle with and begin to understand. That is important. But I think we had the pendulum swing a little bit too much, and we grew a church world that isolated age groups to a point where we call it, siloing, where everybody's in their own little silo. And in the youth ministry world, one fellow coined the term the one-eared Mickey Mouse. You have the youth group that's kind of over here, off the rest of the church. And we have lost some of the connectedness between our children and our students and our adults. And I think we need to work hard as a church in pulling our people back together. And so that's part of what I get the privilege of doing in our context, is trying to figure out how do we do that without losing the value of student ministry and the value of children's ministry and the value of all these other things that are going on in the church, but how do we also merge these things together and say, how can we be a family again? So our kids are interacting with adults and they're learning something from the wisdom of those adults, but also our adults are interacting with kids, and our adults are learning from the childlike faith and the recklessness and the fun of kids. Because frankly, we get a little stuffy as we get older, and we forget how to have fun. And our kids can teach us a lot. So pulling us together, I think, is incredibly important. So another little piece of framework is when your kids are born, at least this is how it went in my house. And I think as I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of teenagers and families, I think this happens fairly frequently. We have a desire to help our kids grow up and be well-rounded. So when your kids are at a certain age, you decide, piano lessons, or, violin lessons, or music lessons of some sort, because we want to culturize them. So they need to take piano lessons. And then at some juncture, sports comes into the picture. Yeah, they need to play soccer, or they need to play baseball, or they need to play softball or basketball, whatever. So sports comes into the picture. And then in another quadrant or another sphere, you as a parent are going, I want to help my kid learn respect. And I want them to grow in character. So we're going to teach them, in this area as well. Well, eventually, a battle starts to happen. And some, maybe not in every kid. I know it's not in every kid because we have artists. But eventually my children said, I don't want to play the piano. I don't want to take these lessons anymore. And, mom and dad and child went like this over practicing the piano. So we said, forget it. You don't need to take piano lessons anymore. And then for some of our kids, eventually we realized they're not athletes. And so athletics kind of falls by the wayside because their interests lie somewhere else. And so we say, yeah, that's okay. You don't need to do that anymore. But we don't look at the respect part and say, oh yeah, you're 13 and you're struggling with respecting authority. That's okay, don't worry about it. You don't need to do that anymore. We don't have that same mentality, or I hope we don't, when we're talking about character. What we desperately want in our kids is for them to grow up as men and women of faith and men and women of character. And so how do we do that? I brought my little glasses of water, or pitchers of water. Because, for example, if you are a baseball player, okay, if you are Sam Shields or Mariano Rivera, and you know a lot about pitching, and your son wants to be a pitcher, you invest what you know in that kid, and you can fill his cup till it's overflowing because you know a ton about pitching. Well, maybe you're just a dad who played high school baseball, and you were a first baseman. Well, you can teach your kid to throw, you can teach him a little bit, but you're not Mariano Rivera, So you can teach him a little bit, but you need somebody else to come along and say, hey, I know something about pitching. Let me come alongside you and also invest in your kid and teach them how to pitch. Now, if you're me, you know nothing about pitching and baseball. So here I am trying to invest in my child. That doesn't work so well because I'm completely empty. I know nothing about pitching. I know nothing about baseball. And so my child needs a ton of other people who are going to pour into them to help them learn how to play. Okay? The same is true with our faith. Our faith is something that we try to pass on to our kids. But there's a significant correlation between our own lives and what we can pass on. And we have to first examine our own lives, and then we have to learn to build in other systems that can help pour into our kids where we are not necessarily adequately prepared. Okay? And that's that merge between you and the church. Okay? So what I want to do is talk about 3 different systems, or 3 different ways, 3 different circles where you can begin to see the transfer of faith into your kids, and you can begin to see their cup filled. Because as a youth worker, Adam will tell you that even if Adam is full, okay, in his knowledge of faith and his desire to hang out with students and help them learn, he can only give this much, and he needs to be refilled. If he gives this much, then he's down 3/4. And if he doesn't do something to refill himself, eventually he burns out and is no longer useful to the rest of the kids. And so he needs help in refilling his own soul so that he can minister to kids out of the overflow of his heart. Well, that is true for every one of us, not just vocational ministers. Okay? We have to invest in our own kids out of the overflow of our heart. So I think what we want to do is combine the church and the home. And we want to pull these 2 things together so that we can partner together and help our kids grow in their faith. All right, we're at church. Did anybody bring a Bible? Yeah, somebody's got it on their phone. Come on. I put my phone over there. So 1 Corinthians chapter 3. So if you wouldn't mind, let's have somebody read verses 6 through 10. This is just a great little passage that reminds us of the role that we play in the life of others, including our children. So 1 Corinthians 3, 6 through 10. Somebody read. Go. Thanks.
5 and 6 here. Through 10.
Yep.
I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, God's building. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it.
Excellent. Okay. So here's the first chunk of encouragement for you tonight. It is not your job to make faith grow in your children. That's God's job. You can't make faith grow in your kids. It is your job to plant and your job to water. Your job to cultivate, your job to come alongside, but you cannot make it grow in their heart. That's God's job. So the first word of encouragement is take a monkey off your back and remember that it's not your job. Sometimes we try to have this battle. And it's like the battle we have with piano and the battle we have with sports. And we want to reach into their life and open their eyes and open their heart and make them see that this is important and this matters and this will be incredibly transformative in their life, because God's life, the flourishing life that God wants for them, is way better than what they might be thinking or seeing in some other way. But we can't do that. We can't make them see this. That's God's job. But we can do everything possible to put them in positions where God can work in their life without distraction. And so, again, 3 areas: the home, the church, and then I'm going to add a third one of service. Okay? So in your home, here's the first thing. There is a guy, his name is Christian Smith. He's a sociologist at Notre Dame University. He's been doing research on adolescence and spirituality for a long time, maybe 10, 15 years. He's been doing a longitudinal study with teenagers. So he started with these kids when they were in early high school, and he's followed them into young adulthood. And he's watched their faith grow or not. And he's asked them, he's met with these people numerous times over the course of these years. And there's a lot about Christian Smith's research that is incredibly helpful. But reading his books is a little dry. But one of the things that he says that I think is incredibly helpful for us as parents is a little bit of a soul check for us. And that is this. Most parents, when it comes to faith in their children, get what they are. So parents, in our homes, most parents, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to faith, they get what they are. So if we are to dig into that a little bit, it means, where are you in your faith? How important is your faith to you? If your faith is not important to you, the likelihood of your faith being important to your children is diminished. So what we first need to do is examine our own hearts and examine where we are in our life with God. Because I hear regularly from parents who are asking questions like, why can't, I want my kid to learn how to pray. I want my kid to read his Bible. I want my kid to bring his Bible. And then, you look and ask that parent, well, do you pray? Do they see you pray? Do you read your Bible? Do they see you read your Bible? Do you take your Bible to church? Do they see you take your Bible to church? And if the answer is no, I don't pray, I don't read my Bible, I don't, take my Bible to church, the likelihood of your child getting excited about something you're not excited about is very small. They have to see that you're excited about that. And when they see you excited, the chances of them getting excited increases greatly. Faith is more caught than it is taught. So Adam and his team can teach the basics of faith. We can go to confirmation class and we can learn about church history. We can learn theology. We can learn doctrine. But head knowledge and facts do not translate to equally, like one-to-one correlation to life transformation. Okay? You can know a lot about God without knowing God. You know, Adam and I were just at a conference a couple of weeks ago with middle school students, and the speaker there really highlighted this to say, you know, now this person loves Garth Brooks. Why? I don't know. But, you know, if I were good friends, I'm a Yankee fan, so if I were good friends with, you know, Mariano Rivera, and I told you, Mariano Rivera and I are great friends, and you said, oh yeah, prove it to me, you know, and we you know, I just start listing stats about Mariano. You know, you'd be great, but, you know, introduce me to him. Well, you know, I can't do that. You know, but if we're in a social setting and Mariano walks in and goes, hey, Alan, how you doing? And he walks over and he gives me a hug, you know, or high five, whatever. You know, then you understand that I really know Mariano. Okay, there's a difference between knowing Jesus and knowing about Jesus. And so Adam can do a good job of helping to teach our kids the facts of our faith, which I utterly believe are incredibly important. Because without the knowledge, you know, I think the heart doesn't adequately move in a direction of really knowing God. Okay, so we need the knowledge. But as parents, we have the opportunity to help our students see how their faith and that knowledge impacts their day-to-day life. Because the reality is, how many hours a week are they at church? You know, very few. How much time do they really interact with their small group leaders? Very few. How much time do they spend with you? Sometimes too much. Sometimes as they get older, not enough. Especially as college is looming and you're going, I haven't taught you this. But faith is caught, and we need to spend time capturing that faith and spending time with our kids and helping them see life lived as men and women of faith. And if we aren't living as men and women of faith, again, the likelihood of our kids living it is diminished. The next thing is that margin equals kindness. I just got off a 3-month sabbatical, which is something our church is so gracious to do. And it is the most wonderful thing in the world to have 3 months to, you know, decompress, read, think, you know, do projects that you want to do. And in that space, one of the things that you wrestle with is this struggle between quantity time and quality time. And in America, I believe that we buy into the lie that quality time is what our kids need. And you know, we easily dismiss the need for quantity time because the time that we're spending is quality, at least in our minds. And when you have some space to find margin in your life and you spend quantity time with your kids, you find a totally different dimension to your relationship that you miss when you're running fast. You know, so I would encourage you as a parent to look for margin in your life. How do you build margin to be able to spend quantity time with your kids? And the more kids you have, the more difficult that is. And you know, I know that life is complicated, but it's something to consider. And the last thing is, are you as a parent being poured into? Where are you getting your soul fed? You know, you can't invest in your kids unless you are being invested in. eventually your soul runs dry, and it's difficult to fill someone else's soul when you don't have anything to give. So whether it's times like this, or some sort of small group, or a Bible study, or what, how are you getting your soul cared for? And I would encourage that tremendously, because again, there's a direct correlation between how you're doing and how your kids are doing. The second thing is the church. I mentioned briefly some of these ideas about the church. Dr. Chap Clark is at Fuller Seminary and is a fantastic researcher and youth worker. And he's written a lot about how we as a church interact with our teenagers. And one of the things that he describes that I've tried to latch onto in my own life is this idea that we need at least 5 adults investing in every one of our children. So in the youth worker world, in middle school, it's great to have 1 adult for every 5 middle school kids. If I have that ratio, I feel pretty good that when we go places, we're going to be able to be safe and have fun, and these adults are going to enjoy themselves and not pull their hair out, because as much as I love middle schoolers, 6th grade boys are still 6th grade boys, and you get a whole bunch of them together, and sometimes it's a little chaotic, and so you need that ratio. But the problem is we translate that then to the adult world and say, okay, well, I as an adult am investing in these 5 kids, and that's good. Well, Chap really flips that on its head and says, no, we need 5 adults pouring into every one of our kids. So as a parent, what I would look for in this arena is this is not the church's job. It's not the church's job to program and structure this for you. Although the church can help and the church can partner with us in trying to help this happen, it's your job as a parent to say, how can I find 5 people to invest in my kid? And the reality is there's probably, for many of you, maybe most of you or all of you, there are probably already those adults in the lives of your kids. But they may not be all that intentional. And so I would encourage you as a parent to just think through, who really is an influential person in my kid's life, and can I have a conversation with that person and invite them to be investing in my child more intentionally? Can I talk to them about saying hi to my kid on Sunday morning and being intentional with that? Sometimes it just happens naturally, but sometimes I'm too busy, and there's a lot of people running around, and you go to second service and I go to first service, or you go to that campus and I go to this campus, and I'm not real intentional about trying to learn what's going on in your life, or asking about how did that play go the other night, or how was that game and how did you do? But can we have 5 people who are interested in investing in our kids' lives? And what Chap's research says is the more people, the more adults that are investing in the life of a teenager, the more likely they are to commit to and stick with their faith long after high school. And that's really simple. I personally remember as a kid, I was a very rambunctious child. I was just home. My folks are in their late 70s, and I was just at home. And over sabbatical, I spent a week hanging out with my parents, and we were driving around. We stopped at a thrift store that they volunteer in, and our church, my home church, kind of runs this thrift store, and it helps fund their Christian school. And the gal that was working behind the counter is a gal that was like a Sunday school teacher for me when I was a child, and her husband was the church custodian, and he was just awesome. He's not very tall, but he's really thick. He was a Marine, and he would come to youth group, and he'd tell stories about his time in Korea, and just phenomenal stuff. And I remember this stuff vividly that Mr. Kilishek told us. And I had some rough encounters with Mr. Kilishek, because in our fellowship hall in the basement of our church, we had curtains on a drop track and a drop ceiling. And you pull the curtains and you could divide the fellowship hall up into all these different Sunday school rooms. And I decided one day it'd be really fun to swing on those things because you could ride it all the way across the fellowship hall. Well, it was great until about a quarter of the way when the whole ceiling came down. And my dad was not real happy with me, but he made me go back and spend the next Saturday with Mr. Killershek, putting all, fixing it. I don't remember that part because I'm sure I didn't do anything that was helpful. But one thing I remember is maybe a year or two later, it must have been longer than that because I must have been early high school. Mr. Killershek stopped me on a Sunday morning in the lobby. And again, I was the kid who was running everywhere, probably running over the elderly people in the church, and they, my parents were getting the phone calls like, "Tell your child to stop running in the church." And Mr. Killershek stopped me, and his hands were like this big. And so, I just remember him doing this, looking at me and saying, "Alan, one day you're going to be a youth pastor." And I vividly remember that moment with that man who took 10 seconds out of his life to say something encouraging to me. And all of those circumstances in my interactions with Mr. Killershek made that moment an incredibly impressionable time for me. And what I tell you that because you as adults, whether it's your kids or other kids, you have so much power to invest in the lives of the kids in this church. And those kids, they will remember the statements that you make. Now, I also vividly remember that my parents had phone calls, and my mom was on the school board of our Christian school that I went to. And often the school board meetings were revolving around what are we going to do about Alan. And my mom would come, and I know that my principal did not like me at all. And I say that, I don't know what he thought of me, but my impression is that man does not like me. And that's my impression to this day. And so what he did, his body language, whatever, he communicated to me that he didn't like me. And we have great power as adults to invest in kids. So how are we investing in the kids of the church? You have an opportunity to come alongside them and be a caring adult, to know a kid's name, to know something about them, to ask them what's going on. So find these people for your kids and be that person for other people's kids. It can start in your small group. If you're in a small group, by all means, get to know the children of the other families in your small group. Don't just have adult time, which is important, but take some time to get to know the kids. I love it when members of my friends, members of my community group often show up at my kids' sporting events. That radically impacts my kids. I know Chris, for example, she hates athletics, and she shows up to watch. And that just blows my kids away because they know she hates athletics. And two of my kids are swimmers. And, to sit on a pool deck, it's like a track meet in the rainforest. It's long, you sit there for 4 hours for 26 seconds, And, so for Chris to do that makes a huge impact in my kids' lives. We have a chance to do something significant. Sunday school teachers, as a church, I think we have a chance to get to know the people that we work with, when you have kids working in places where adults are, can we help the adults really utilize that time to get to know not just the third graders, but the teenagers that are helping the adults help the third graders? So my 8th grade son, on a negative side, my 8th grade son volunteers in children's ministry, and he works with like 4-year-olds. And he came home and we were dialoguing about, hey, what'd you do today? Oh, I left my Bible in the room. Okay, well, which room is it? Oh, it's the 4-year-old room. I think I know where that is. Who's the teacher? I don't know. What's her name? I don't know. My son, who has been working with this same couple 2 Sundays a month for 6 months, has no idea what their name is. Now, part of that is my 8th grade son, but part of that is why are you as an adult not investing in at least getting to know this teenager that's in here helping you every week? Why, as adults, can we not take that little bit of a step? Now, I realize sometimes it's like a middle school dance. It's very intimidating. The girls are over there and the boys are over here and nobody wants to talk to each other. Some teenagers can be very intimidating. Why? This is the kind of stuff that confounds me. Why can a 12-year-old control how an adult behaves? But they can't. I don't get it. I understand it. I see it, but I don't really get it. But there is a fear that adults have about interacting with that 12-year-old. And it just blows me away. But how do we break down that fear in our own hearts and walk across the dance floor and say to that kid, "Hi, I'm Alan. What's your name? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite candy bar?" And then you bring them their favorite candy bar, or whatnot. But getting to know those kids, I think, is an incredible opportunity. The last thing I'll say on the church here is this idea that the more people that know your children, the greater impact it has on your children. So this last year, one of the things that we do in our church, and a lot of churches do this, but when you're graduating high school, you get paraded up front. And so we have this huge pile of teenagers, seniors in high school, and their parents up front on a Sunday morning. And everybody kind of goes along and says, "Yeah, this is my name, and this is what I'm doing, next year." And my wife and I are standing up there last May with our senior, and I'm just looking across the congregation, and I'm almost in tears because I'm looking at all the people that are sitting in the congregation who have invested in my son over the years. And Ethan is a great kid. He's awesome. He's a knucklehead too. But he's a great kid. And a lot of the reason I say that he's a great kid is because of the investment all those different people had in his life. I looked at Dan Hakes, who had been his Sunday school teacher for like 6 years, and he's a Nebraska fan, and I don't know why, but Ethan and he would have these fun little bouts back and forth over Nebraska, and it just is amazing to look and see how many adults have invested in your kid's life. And that needs to be replicated over and over and over again. And that is, I think, a beautiful picture of what the church is. Oh, one more thing. When it comes to the church, I think corporate worship is also incredibly important. This is another nugget from a different research project that the people at Fuller Youth Institute and Fuller Seminary have done. There's not a lot of magic bullets. There are not a lot of great formulas for, if you do this, your kid's going to turn out. I wish there were, but there's not. But one of the things that this research project came to a conclusion on is when our kids are involved in the adult corporate worship service, the more that they are involved and engaged in that service, the better off they are long term. And one of the reasons is just simply the fact that what we've done since 1950 is we've created the perfect church service for kids. Youth group is really fun. And when they graduate from high school, all of a sudden they have to go to real church for the first time, and they're like, well, "This is terrible." We're gone. Because it's not all about them anymore. And we all know that, at this stage of life, it's all about them. And so to get our students involved in the corporate worship service, and they don't have to be in on the stage and all that kind of stuff. They got to be there. And honestly, when they're there, and I know this doesn't happen in your church, but in my church, everybody sits in the exact same place every week. And so my kids also know the people that sit around us. And we have no interaction with those people other than the fact that we sit near them every week. And so they get to know their names just because they're sitting near them. And they would never know those people in any other context. And so there's some significant benefit, I think, just in going to corporate worship. Well, the last thing is service. I'm supposed to be done in 1 minute. But service. I mentioned just a second ago that kids are very much self-absorbed at this age. That's normal. That's just part of being a teenager. We all were that way. So if you don't think you were, ask your parents. You were. So teenagers are very self-absorbed. So how do we help with that? We help with that by helping them get to places where they can think about others. And service is an absolutely wonderful way to get them to focus on something other than themselves. So that, I think, can happen in the local church. It can happen like my son Jay serving in the 4-year-olds. And I wish that you could kind of start to merge some of these two things where adults in the church are knowing my child because he's serving. Again, that's not happening. Wish it were. But it doesn't have to be in the local church. It's a great place to start, but it can also be around the city. There are so many great places for kids to plug in and serve. Now, sometimes that means it takes a little bit of a commitment for you, because until your kids are driving, you got to cart them there. But man, what another golden opportunity for you to serve alongside them. That goes back to number 1. They're seeing you serve. Enough of telling our kids, you need to go serve, when I'm going to sit here and read the paper. Go serve with them. Let them see how valuable this is to you, and that will help them get excited about it in their own heart. So again, you know what? There are no silver bullets. There's no magic formula. I can't tell you, do this, your kids will turn out. Anybody who does is lying or trying to sell you something. The other thing is, oftentimes you come to evenings like this, and I can say, here are a bunch of things, little nuggets, things that you could do that might help foster some faith in your child and in your home. It might, and sometimes you leave and you feel like, man, I thought I was bad when I came, and now you've told me like 97 things I should be doing that I'm not doing any of them, and now I feel really bad. Don't allow this to be one of those heaping burning coals on my head moments. But pick one thing and say, what's one thing I can do that we can begin to work on in our home. Little resource. So the folks at Fuller did this Sticky Faith research project, and they have a ton of resources for families. And this book, Sticky Faith Guide for Your Family, is 100 little projects, little ideas for how to have faith conversations in your home and do this with your kids. If your kids are younger, it's a lot easier to start when they're younger. So when your kids are older, I recognize it's that much more complicated. To try and sit down with family devotions with seniors in high school, they're going to look at you like, yeah, whatever, Dad. But if your kids are younger, it's good. Now, I wouldn't tell you to not try, but I just recognize it's difficult. So Fuller, you can also just look up their website, Fuller Youth Institute, and they have tons of little resources that can help you talk about faith with your kids in the home. But again, nurture your own soul. Get your kids plugged into places where they are going to meet other people, especially in the local church, that can invest in them and help them begin to serve somewhere. And I think if we work on those 3 arenas, we begin to see the faith in our kids flourish in ways, because we are planting and we are watering and we are cultivating. And then the most important thing that we haven't spent any time talking about is pray. You know, that's what you can do. Pray, 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 pray. And have all your friends pray. And pray for all your friends' kids. And when we do these things, we create a soil in the hearts of our kids that is, you know, hopefully receptive and ready for God to do his work. Let me pray for you, and then we'll transition to whatever's next. So God, I just pray that each of these parents would hopefully not leave discouraged, but hopefully have some encouragement that whatever they're doing, I'm sure they're doing some good things, but even if they're doing a ton of good things, there's probably something we can work on. And even if they feel like they're not doing anything, there's something we can pick up and we can move in the right direction, and it's not too late. So God, I pray that tonight would be an encouragement to these parents, that faith can flourish in the hearts of their kids. And it is our job to plant and water and cultivate, and it's your job to make it grow. So thanks, God, for your grace. May we have it with our kids. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Alan.
Yep.
In a couple minutes, we're gonna bring up. We have a parent panel of experts, sort of in parenting. But before that, when I was talking with Alan about what he wanted to share, and as he talked about this idea of you can't take you can't expect your kids to go where you aren't willing to go on your own or in your own life. It really brought to mind. There's basically the Kohlbergs. Getting to know the Kohlbergs and Jennifer and Pat's story is just really been cool to see how the Lord has really taken hold of their life, and really in just as they've started seeking Him more and more, how that's really reflected in their kids' faith, and their oldest son Robert is a head of FCA at California Trail, and teaching every week and really just doing a great job with that. And so we just wanted to invite Pat to come and just kind of share his testimony of how he's kind of been transformed by the Lord and how he's seen that just kind of transform his whole family as well. And so,
thanks, Adam. Adam called me a couple nights ago, asked if I would speak here, and asked me a little bit of my testimony. And so I went online and read about this event that I was going to be speaking at. And I think the description was, veteran parents sharing their wisdom. And I assumed that some sort of mistake had been made. I figured Alan had dialed the wrong number and asked me to speak at this event. But after listening to Alan, it does make more sense. So I'll kind of share my story with everybody. I was raised in the church. I thank God that my parents did that. They brought me to church on a regular basis. Went off to college. I quit attending church, kind of fell away. I always considered myself a Christian, but wasn't really practicing in any meaningful way. Got married, had kids, and Jennifer and I made a decision to go back to church and raise our kids in the church the way we were. But looking back on that was probably more of a cultural decision and not really a spiritual decision. Circumstances led us to change churches. We joined Colonial. And, listening to Pastor Jim speak, talking to others, spending time with others, other members here, began to realize that something wasn't right with my faith. My faith wasn't where it needed to be. I recognized that. Like I said, I always considered myself a Christian. In fact, I was very interested in apologetics. I would read books about Christianity. I would study, the cases, making cases for the resurrection, etc. And I believed in the resurrection. I really did. And like Alan said, I felt like I knew a lot. I knew a lot about God, but I didn't know God. Sitting in church, I listened to the story from Matthew 7, when Jesus tells the story. He says, on that day, a group of people want to get into heaven, and they say, Lord, Lord, I've done all kinds of good works in your name. Let me in. And to which Jesus replies, I never knew you. Away from me. Do I know Jesus? Does Jesus know me? I go to church. I donate to the church. But I don't think I know Jesus. So I began to seek him, and I prayed, and I asked him to come to me. And it was a process. I continued to read and pray, and finally I read the Bible. Duh. And I found out that, it is the living word. It is the word of God. The living word pierced my heart. I was reading a passage, and it really struck me. And I was different. I was different the next day, and I knew it. I was different on the inside. So that led to a lot of things. Very shortly after that, we went on a mission trip to Haiti. And that was huge. It was a turning point in my life. My life is before Haiti and after Haiti. And Adam, it's our 1-year anniversary, actually, this weekend. But it was a huge point in my life, and part of that was my whole family went on that trip, which kind of segues into some of the things with discipleship and et cetera. But since then, I've been intentional about reading the Bible in front of my kids, talking to my kids. We sit on the dinner table and talk about our faith and how important it is to us. We study together. We use the Right Now Media subscription from Colonial a lot. I don't know if anybody else does, but we get on there, we watch Bible study videos. This fall, at least at Clavero, we studied Philippians. The middle schoolers did. And which my 2 kids are middle schoolers. Robert's 14, Sam's 11. I think I said that. That's important information, I suppose, for this. But the kids were studying Philippians, so we got on Right Now Media, and we studied, we watched Matt Chandler videos, To Live is Christ, to Die is Gain, which is what they were doing in middle school. It was a great experience, great time together. We've been harvesters here. We've done Turkey Bowl, where we deliver meals to the needy, and several other things. And obviously, the mission trip together was huge for our entire family. But those are some of the things I've tried to do, and the key was, I think, myself recognizing some of the spiritual deficiencies in myself and where I was, and get that corrected is really what I think has really led our whole family to develop our faith, and my kids to develop in their faith. It's really neat to watch them. Like Adam said, my oldest leads FCA, California Trail, and we have great conversations. He does his little study the Wednesday night before, and some with his lesson. We have great conversations on Wednesday nights before his meetings. A lot of neat stuff. And part of what I've done, again, kind of tagging on what Alan has kind of said, is having other people involved in our kids' lives. But in the process of serving and doing these things, we met a lot of great people, people that are way beyond me spiritually, and we spent time around them. They've mentored us and my kids, and that's been huge too. And this has really all happened in a fairly short amount of time. So it's truly amazing what God can do. God has done amazing things for me and me and to me, and and He's done it for the whole family. So that's kind of my testimony. So Adam can have that.
Thank you, Pat. Now's now's the time when the veteran parents come out. And so we invited some families from the church that have had kids that have kind of gone through youth ministry to kind of come up and kind of share how they've practiced family discipleship in their own homes and everything. So we're grab some chairs, and if you guys want to come forward and come grab a seat, we'll make some room. We'll get rid of Alan's mess. I do want to encourage, just as Alan shared and as Pat shared, just have opportunities for the practices that Alan's talked about to help serve and connect within the church. Like Pat said, we do every other year the high school will do a high school mission trip to Haiti, and then last year we started in the spring. Was our first ever middle school family trip to Haiti, and so the Colbergs were a part of that, along with several other families, and it was great. Just kind of how Alan talked about serving together, and it was really cool to see. I've been on several trips with students and seen students transform through missions. It was awesome to see parents transformed as well, and I think it was cool for the kids to see oh wow, Dad cries, and so it was a really great event. And so we would love, if you have a middle schooler or even a high schooler, if we have room, we'd love for you to come participate on one of those trips as well. And then as Alan talked about the 5 adults to 1 student, we really try to incorporate older adults in as ministry partners in our ministry. And so I just look and I've seen Sarah and Pat are both Sunday morning teachers, and Judy's leads and has led for a while a girls' life group, and Amy has led a life group for us before. And so Tony's a host family, and so just a great way for us as a church to kind of wrap around and to all support and to help out. And so we want to encourage, even if your kid's doing well or whatnot, even if they're not, there's a lot of opportunity for you to volunteer and to kind of help invest in the life of a student that's beyond yours. And so let's say your student's like, Mom, Dad, I don't want you helping with my grade. Plenty of other grades in which you can come and invest in. So we want to please, you're all welcome. But this is our panel of parents. Over here we have the Casey family. Kevin and Casey is involved in Free. Well, you're both involved in Freedom Fire and the Freedom Fire ministry. Their son Nick has been a summer staffer for 2 years. Actually, is an continual intern with helping out Corey with the house church ministry and everything. And so they've come and presented to our summer staff several times about having just a marriage and relationship built on the Lord. And so we asked them to come and be a part of this and share with us. And, Bill and Desiree Beal are great families over at Quivira. Bill has been an elder for several years, not currently, right?
Right, not currently.
But lead a Sunday school class, and they've 3 kids. I know you have 4. 3 have gone through summer staff for several years. 1 never did summer staff, but then came on staff actually, and is on staff over here at Warnell, and so it's been great.
All 4 of them have taken Colonial paychecks.
Yes. So we figured we had to have you guys. We're paying your kids to come be a part of this. And the Butins, when I was a great Warnell family, where I was asking how long have you guys been at Warnell, the Warnell youth staff told me forever. The answer. So career class, to
not career,
Right.
No.
young marrieds.